everyone, and welcome to our 2015 Minnesota Vikings Draft Recap. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and rejoining me today is our favorite NFL talent evaluator, Geoff Nichols. Geoff, a really pretty interesting draft over the weekend, wasn't it?
Definitely was, Tom. Thanks for having me back. I always appreciate doing these things.
No problem. I'll tell you, most sports writers that I'm reading about are applauding the Minnesota Vikings as having a very good collective draft. But what I want to do with you is dig into the many draft choices for your reaction and insight, kind of individually, and see what your thoughts are, by themselves and then collectively as a whole. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
Sounds good. I'm going to start, obviously, with everything on people's mind, and that's that number 11 pick that rolled around. And I was wondering, did it surprise you that the Vikings selected cornerback Trey Waynes? And, he's obviously an aggressive press corner, which is in Mike Zimmer's wheelhouse. But what does he bring to this defense, and what does he need to do to work on to become an elite NFL defensive back?
Sure. Great question, Tom. I think a lot of people leading up to the draft thought the Vikings may be looking at a cornerback at the number 11 pick. I think in my mind, the bigger question would be if the Vikings were going to get an offer that made it worth to trade down the draft board. I think it also, the way the top of the draft fell was a little bit different than many believed it would in at least the mock draft world. From a talent perspective, it fell about how you would believe it would fall. But sitting at the 11th pick, Trey Waynes was looking pretty good in the eyes of Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, I believe. When you think about adding a press corner, 6 foot, about 190, put up quite a few reps on the bench press at the combine. It shows his strength and really has that functional strength to go along with that, what some consider a slender frame. Being able to lock down the outsides of the defense really is the key to the game in Mike Zimmer's defense. We all know Mike Zimmer loves to get to the quarterback, hit the quarterback, knock him on the ground, get the quarterback moving in the pocket to get him off his game. I think anytime you can get a quarterback under pressure, even the best in the business, Aaron Rodgers, Mike Zimmer is showing that once you can get them moving around, anything's really possible. So being able to pick up that number 2 cornerback to go opposite of Xavier Rhodes is a huge add for the Vikings defense. Trey Waynes, in particular, at the 11th pick, I think is a good value. After listening to some of the talk by both Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman, I think they did a good job of explaining that, Trey Waynes does have some things he can improve on, and I think that's definitely true. That's any rookie coming out in the first round, second round, through 7th round. No one's perfect coming out of the draft. Very rarely do you have that can't-miss prospect.
Yeah.
But really, Trey Waynes presents all the athletic needs and wants you'd ever want in a cornerback. He has the size, he has the speed, and on tape he showed the ability to press on the line and really stick to his receivers at the line of scrimmage. I think there's definitely areas of his game he can improve on, especially sticking to his receiver out of breaks towards the boundary. But when all said is done, is we're not going to put the pressure on him to be a number 1 cornerback from day one. We already have that in Xavier Rhodes. I think it would be going a little too far to consider Trey Waynes a luxury pick, since we do have a hole at that number 2 cornerback spot. But I do believe that the Vikings are going to be able to bring him along and really coach him up along the way without having the pressures of him being that number 1 go-to lockdown corner from day one. I think when we brought in Xavier Rhodes, the expectation was we were going to be getting a corner who could start from day one and really lock down some of the NFC North's best receivers. That same pressure is not going to be placed on Trey Waynes. But really what it comes down to is Mike Zimmer is able to coach up defensive backs. He's shown it in the past, and he's shown it even last year, just the improvements we were able to make in the secondary. Of course, our secondary coach has a lot in doing that as well, since he gets some more individual time with these players. But I think Trey Waynes is a great pick. He has the potential to be a great cornerback in any system. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about potential when you're picking near the top of the draft. You want to have some safety, but the Vikings were able to fill a need and get a player of potential. And in the eyes of all talent evaluators, whenever you're able to take one of the best talents available on the board and it fills a need, you're doing something right.
Well, it's interesting because you said, he's got a couple of weaknesses that you have to be coached out of, so let's play armchair quarterback a bit. I watched some of the film on him, and one of the things is he is so aggressive, but sometimes he misplays the run at the line of scrimmage and kind of whiffs on tackles. And, it's funny because the rookies picked their numbers or got their numbers today, and he got number 26, which makes you think of Antoine Winfield. So, what can they do to help him on that run support? And I've also seen what I call to be a little bit handsy, to where he's pretty aggressive with receivers, and he's going to, I would think, have to modify that so he didn't get penalized in the NFL.
No, definitely. I think, yes, I agree with all those comments. He's a very handsy player, and I think the same can be said about Xavier Rhodes. And just this past season, I think Xavier really started to understand when you can have your hands on the receiver and when really you need to get your hands off. I think that's something that all cornerbacks want or have to learn to be successful in the NFL. But really, when it comes down to it, if I were going to be sitting in the GM or the coach's chair for a second, would you rather have the player who has that aggressive mindset and has their hands and is more handsy, or do you want to teach someone to become that? I think it's more of a mental mindset to have that aggressiveness and that compete and that fight in you to really get on the receiver, stick to him, and really want to fight with them at the line of scrimmage. Because you have to remember, as a cornerback, you're the one going backwards. The wide receiver and the quarterback are the ones that are going to dictate your moves. And having that aggressiveness and that confidence even, to be able to do that and stick with the receiver, I think is something that you really want to see in cornerbacks that you're picking near the top of the draft. When it comes to the aggressiveness and the whiffing on tackles in the run game, I think the positive in this is Trey Waynes is a very willing tackler. I don't think there's ever times on film where you're going to see him get out of the way of tackles, avoid taking angles just to avoid having to make a tackle. He's very aggressive in the screen game, which is nice to see. And one play I remember on tape is when they played Ohio State, Ezekiel Elliott, much bigger than Waynes, is coming down, and Waynes just puts his shoulder into his legs and just takes him down. So I don't think it's much of a concern to say that he's whiffed on tackles because he does take good angles to the ball. He seems to have good pursuit skills. And he has the aggressiveness you want in a cornerback. So there's small coaching things you can do to improve that. Just as the techniques of wrapping up instead of maybe trying to hit the running back or receiver down. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a huge concern.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you had anybody who needed to get the help to coach somebody up, it's a guy who started his career as a defensive backs coach, and Mike Zimmer, it's kind of his expertise. And, as I hear you talk, if you're Ziggy Wilf, I'm thinking, okay, I pay Rick Spielman every day. I'm writing that paycheck next week. He did a nice job here. Do you agree?
I agree. I think Rick Spielman did a nice job. The scouting staff did a nice job, and they were able to find a player that Mike Zimmer was going to be able to work with.
Yeah. Now, when they do this, by the way, does that automatically drop Captain Munnerlyn to the slot cornerback position?
I don't think it automatically drops into the slot. I think the idea is that he's a slot cornerback, but I know Captain Munnerlyn said this offseason that he really wants to compete for that outside spot. I think the way Mike Zimmer has run things, at least last year, maybe things will be different in the second year, as every position's an open competition. If Captain Munnerlyn's able to show that he can handle the outside, he's significantly better than any of the other cornerbacks, and we're able to find a solution in the slot, I believe he would be given that role. Do I believe he's a slot cornerback? Yes. The way I kind of see our cornerback position shaping up as a whole, I guess I'm going to kind of go on a little bit of a tangent here, is it really will be interesting to see if they let Xavier Rhodes shadow the number one receiver on the NFC North teams. I think last year they started doing that because he started feeling more comfortable playing on both sides of the field. But having another rookie cornerback possibly starting next to him and Trey Waynes, I'm not sure if they're going to be wanting to move Waynes back and forth to both the right and the left corner spot. Maybe they want to develop him just on one side of the field to begin with. I think he'll be working in a rotation with Terrence Newman a little bit on the outside, since Newman has something left in the tank. But being able to bring in a rotational player with him is going to be able to help him get through the NFL season at this age. And, it offers just a mentor for Waynes on that side of the field, just someone he can bounce ideas out, someone who's been around the corner a little bit, has been around other developing defensive backs, especially in Cincinnati. Drake Kirkpatrick's really come around, and I know Terrence Newman has been a bit of a mentor to him. So, I think that we have plenty of options at cornerback. I think we learned that Josh Robinson isn't a solution in the slot. He's going to be stuck on the outside, and he might get bumped down kind of into that third tier of our outside cornerbacks. But really the interesting thing for me to see will be how Marcus Sherrills can beat some camp. He's still on the roster and has been a heck of a punt returner for us, and I think he's really solidified himself on our roster by doing that task extremely well and being a great special teams player overall. But it really comes down to, at the bottom on the cut line, you can only carry so many cornerbacks. And you already have Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes. Those are both locks to make the roster. I believe Terrence Newman and Captain Munnerlyn are competing. I know neither's, I can't say neither are going to make the roster for sure, since I think the salary and just where they stand on the roster makes it possible they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also have Josh Robinson and Marcus Sherrills. Everyone's not going to make. Oh, and Jabari Price too as well. So there's plenty of cornerbacks on the roster right now, which I think is an improvement over prior years where we didn't have as much depth at the position.
No, it's a nice luxury to have. And, as we look at that, we stayed on the defensive side for that second-round pick. And, it seems like the Vikings have been trying to find a man in the middle linebacker position since Jack Del Rio left the spot. And, we seem to get good value in UCLA linebacker Eric Kendricks. Now, Geoff, he looks to be a three-down player to me, which we haven't had for a while. But he's also put the hand in the ground as a pass rusher in college. What's your thought about this pick, and how are they going to use him?
You know what? I actually loved this pick. I wasn't sure Eric Kendricks was going to fall to us in the second round. The way I had my inside linebackers, I had Stephon Anthony, my number one inside linebacker, but then Eric Kendricks was a very close number two. After that, there was a little bit of drop-off before you got into that second tier of inside linebacker play. In the 4-3 defense, Eric Kendricks is a great inside linebacker and also has the ability to be a weak side linebacker as well. We all know Mike Zimmer likes to play in the nickel, so I'm not sure. Greenway is kind of our defensive leader on the field a little bit. I think in the past it's been nice to have him with some of the younger players on the field, but now that, he's aging a little bit and kind of winding down his career in a sense, and I know if you listen to that, you'd probably disagree. I don't think any
That's all right. We'll make sure. Hey, Geoff, we'll make sure he dials in to hear it. No problem.
I don't think any veteran receiver wants to be told they're on the downside of their career. So sorry about that, Chad. But, having a player who can be a very good coverage linebacker is almost a luxury. So now you have the option of playing both Barr and Kendricks as your nickel linebackers. And then when you're in your base defense, you can move Kendricks back over into the middle of that defense. And now you're sitting with Greenway most likely as your weak linebacker, Kendricks in the middle, and then Barr as your Sam. You're looking a lot deeper at linebacker, a lot stronger in the middle of the field than in the past. Kendricks also has a nice mix of being able to come up and make plays in the run game, and also, like you mentioned, he's put his hand in the ground before in pass rush. I don't know if that's because he was a pass rusher in high school, or if that's because he had such success rushing the passer as a linebacker, they decided they could add that versatility to his game a little bit. But he does get to the quarterback quite well when they sent him on blitzes at UCLA. I think the other thing you really have to see in Kendricks on tape is he's so instinctual. He understands what the offense is trying to do for him. He understands which holes he is going to target, and he almost has a plan in his mind before the play unfolds, which is really what you like to see in very good linebackers, being able to kind of beat the offense to the spot in a sense. So I thought Kendricks was a great value pick at number 45 overall. I think he has a lot of value, as you said. We've been missing that man in the middle, but I think he also, if they decide to use him as a nickel linebacker as well, improves our coverage on any time we're the nickel.
Now, let me ask you this question, because he's not a big guy. He's only 6 foot and about 235 on that. So, that's not traditional middle linebacker size. He had a little bit of injury concern in college. Are you worried about his durability? And, can he play at that weight in the NFL?
Personally, I'm not worried about his durability. I think what you realize on tape is he plays a lot bigger than his actual size. He really comes down with a lot of force, and he plays downhill when he's trying to tackle the ball carrier. He's not someone who gets pushed back by the ball carrier very often. So when you look at both running backs and linebackers, you want to see which way the ball carrier's going. Mm-hmm. So like in good running backs, a lot of good running backs fall forward each play. A lot of good linebackers hit good running backs backwards on a lot of plays. And Kendricks is a guy who really comes downhill and, is able to target at the point of attack and push the ball carrier the other way. So he comes in with a lot of force. Injury concerns, I think, really when you look at it, the Vikings were comfortable taking the second round. So obviously they don't have too many red flags injury-wise on him. I can't speak for the Vikings since they have a lot more medical history on these players than I ever would. But I'm not so worried about his injury past. More so than any other player that was drafted in the second round, I would say. Teams take risks here or there, mm-hmm. and maybe some teams flagged him for injury, others not. But I guess if it was my decision based on the information the general public has, it wouldn't prevent me from drafting him or relying on him in the future.
Would you expect him to be the opening day starter at middle linebacker?
Right now, the way the depth chart stacks up, I would say so. I think Gotti Cole will get him a chance in the middle. I know he's kind of been a fan favorite the past couple of years since he's kind of been an overachiever when he's been given a chance to play. But, you know, as I said, with the quarterback position, it'll be an open competition. But I think Eric Kendricks definitely has an opportunity to step in as a day one starter.
Okay. Now, when we dropped to the third round, again, it seemed like we forgot there was an offensive side of the ball here for a while. But, we have a bit of a raw project and a guy that seems to have a tremendous amount of athletic ability and upside in the pass rushing specialist, Daniel Hunter. What impresses you about him, and can you envision him contributing in his rookie season?
It's hard to say if he's going to contribute in his rookie season. Obviously, Mike Zimmer's a bit of a pass rushing guru, so you never know how quick these guys are going to develop under him. But Danielle Hunter, I really like what the Vikings did in the third round. I think that the player they were targeting was taken at the top of a round, so we decided to trade back multiple times to get a player where they felt like they were actually getting some value on the board. I think as the draft kind of unfolded in the later rounds, we were able to pick up some value on the board in the, 5th through 7th rounds, which really made this pick worth it. But Hunter is a raw project. I don't think anyone will tell you otherwise. He came out early from LSU when, a lot of people encouraged him to stay. Mm-hmm. I think it's a testament to his overall skill set that he brings to the table that he was able to be drafted in the third round. I know in my evaluations that I had him pinned kind of in that middle of the third round to the beginning of the 5th. So I think the Vikings got good value with him in the late third based on the fact that they can use him both as a defensive end and also have the opportunity to kind of sub him in as a situational pass rusher from the linebacker spot as well, since he definitely has the speed and the skill set to do that as well. But he really is just a physical specimen. I would call him more of an athlete than a football player at this point. Mm-hmm. But really he has considerable upside. And when you look at him as a whole, I think when you look at players who are raw, I think he has a higher floor than a lot of these raw players just because he possesses the size and the speed that, just really can take a player a long ways. Mm-hmm. So even if he doesn't fully develop into that stud defensive end or outside linebacker that he is capable of becoming, he's going to be that situational pass rusher that can be rotated along the line and have some sort of impact throughout his career. And to be able to get that in the late third round is great value. I think really what he's going to have to learn is how to disengage off the edge. I think that he has all the physical attributes to be able to do that. That's just more of a coaching thing. I think sometimes based on the tape I saw on him, his reactions at the line of scrimmage were sometimes a bit slow. Not that he couldn't process the information fast enough, but he was possibly unsure. And instead of having that aggressive nature and just going at the play, he wanted to make sure that he wasn't going to, give up the edge and run support in a situation where he believed he should be just strictly rushing the passer. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just the learning curve that happens. I think when you look at underclassmen who come out as well, the offensive linemen and the defensive linemen seem be the ones who really need the longest time to develop based on missing that extra year of college. Not to say that he's wrong in coming out, since I think he's in a great situation here to develop behind some good defensive linemen. And another raw player who came out and possibly could kind of take him under his wing a little bit is Everson Griffin. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of similarities between the two coming out of college, both when Everson came out of USC. I believe, I guess on tape, that Everson was maybe a little more polished, but I think Danielle Hunter has a great chance of really having some time to develop under the wings of some of these players and be that depth rotational player and potential starter at defensive end in the future.
Okay. Well, we finally get to the offense, by the way. Once we dropped into the fourth round, and after not drafting an offensive lineman high in the draft since Matt Khalil was taken in the first round a few years ago, we may have gotten first-round talent in Pitt offensive tackle T.J. Clemmings. Now, Geoff, what concerns do you have about Clemmings, especially in the injury front? And do you see him competing for either Phil Loadholt's job or going head-to-head with Khalil for playing time?
I think... Well, first after, we did go defense the first 3 rounds, just based on how the board fell, I think that if the Vikings would have been taking an offensive player that would have filled a need, I just didn't really see the value there. So I think the Vikings played their board or kind of played to their hand how they had it dealt to them a little bit. instead of trying to force something, and which I applaud, I guess, if I was a fan thinking about how to get the best value out of your draft picks. But now back on to TJ Clemmings. As for his injury concern, as I said, I only have as much injury information as any other fan. I don't have too much information to go off of. Obviously, the Vikings have a lot more information and have had him into the building, and we're able to check out his foot and, every aspect of his physical state. But, TJ Clemmings is an interesting case. I guess I didn't really understand the first-round hype on him all that much, just for the fact that he's so raw. He was a defensive player coming out of high school, and then they switched him to the offensive side of the ball. In his first year as an offensive lineman, it was a real struggle for him, which you would expect it to be, though. I don't want to, scare anyone here. Obviously, if you take someone who's been playing defense their whole life and switch them to the offensive line, that's a major change and something that they're going to have to grow into. But that jump he made from his first year on offense to his second year was, pretty significant and something that was very eye-catching, I would say, in the scouting world, in the sense that when you have someone of his size with that kind of athleticism, to see that kind of gains in 1 year makes you really start to wonder of what his ceiling really is. Because he has all the physical attributes to be a great right tackle, in my opinion, in the league. Not to say that left tackle is out of the equation, but I really see him being that run mauler on the right side of the line in the future. He's going to need a lot of time to develop, though. Okay. I would not pencil him in really as going head-to-head with Phil Loadholder, Matt Khalil in year one. I think he's going to be able to learn a lot, and he's going to be able to learn a lot by not being pressured into a starting role as well. Sometimes for these athletic type, raw players, the best thing that can happen to them is to go into to training camp not having the pressure to start. Not having that media attention on you, just being able to kind of go about your business and live under the radar a little bit. Mm-hmm. I guess if I was a player, I think that would be most beneficial to me because you can kind of just go into work, take care of business, and head home. But, he has all the physical attributes you want. I guess the main injury concern many said in the draft were his foot. It sounds like that was an injury that occurred in the past, not this past season. So it might have showed up on an X-ray or an MRI or whatever method that you choose to show that there is at one point some sort of stress fracture there. But really, maybe teams get too technical at this kind of stuff, since there's obviously some calculations that have to go into seeing the longevity of the career, since obviously you might be fine now, but you're going to want him to last for multiple years and possibly be able to take over a starting spot. But if he's able to play on it now, in my opinion, without any pain, and he was able to go through all these private workouts and be able to go through the combine without having any hesitations or holdups, I really don't think that it's a major issue moving forward. If I'm trying to direct which way he's going, I'm going to put him at right tackle. But really, at this point in his career, just being able to have that flexibility to play on both sides is going to be great for the Vikings from a depth perspective as well. Having someone with natural talent, say someone goes down with injury, he has to be ready to step up, since, I believe he's probably the next one on the roster. He's going to be the number 3 offensive tackle on the roster. So if one of them goes down, he's going to be stepping up. But at the end of the day, I like the pick. I think it's a value pick. And, it's not really a risky move in the sense in the 4th round, but I think he's always going to be, at minimum, a very good backup. But there's a very high probability that he's going to be able to be a starter in this league if he develops.
Okay. The one that surprised me a little bit is the next pick that came up is we seem to have this deep pool at tight end with Kyle Rudolph and Chase Ford and even Red Ellison. Yet the Vikings picked athletic tight end Michael Pruitt from Southern Illinois, kind of a small school player. I understand he has some concerns with blocking, but is a pretty good size playmaker, receiving wise at the tight end. And I know he played the number 2 and number 3 receiver spots sometimes in college. What is he? What role is he on the team, and how is he different than the tight ends we have?
You know what? I think he's going to be kind of a hybrid role when it comes to the mini camps, the off-season workouts, and training camp. When we made the pick, the first thing I thought of is it's such a Norv Turner pick. Mm-hmm. Being able to pick up a player that has a whole bunch of versatility, that can play across the roster. Yes, he's a tight end by nature, but he also lined up as a receiver. He's also, the prototypical size for an H-back as well. So you can line him up in the backfield. I don't know if his blocking is up to par right there. So wouldn't say he's going head to head with Zach Line right now. But he's someone who can really play anywhere on offense, and that's how you make a roster, really. Whenever you have players that can play at multiple positions and do a number of different things quite well, you're going to have a good chance of making the roster. But I think if you look at our tight end position as a whole, Kyle Rudolph is the incumbent at starter, and I don't think anyone on our current roster is going to be able to outplay him. But the big question with Kyle is, can he stay healthy? And it has been the last 2 years. Nothing against Kyle, because he's a great player, and when he's on the field, he's one of the better, if not, one of the better tight ends in the league. But being able to bring in some depth at the position, Truth is a very good athlete as well. I think if you kind of look at what he did at the combine, it matches what he does on tape. He's a very quick receiver. He's able to get good separation. He has decent hands. And he has the athleticism to be very good at tight end as well. And, when you look at the Southern Illinois Ties, maybe Rick Spielman felt a little bit of an attachment there.
There you go.
Coming out of his alma mater. So maybe that was the deal. Maybe Norv kind of figured that out and kind of sold Rick Spielman on that. But, no, I think it was a good pick. I think he provides a lot of depth on the roster. But really it comes back to what you said. Is he a good blocker? And I think the way he makes the roster is if he can improve his blocking. Because right now you have Kyle Rudolph on the roster, you have Red Ellison, you have Chase Ford, and then Brandon Bostic, which, everyone knows Brandon Bostic from his botched onside kick recovery in the NFC Championship game for the Packers. So maybe people like him for that. But I really think that Pruitt can overtake him for that fourth spot on the roster if the Vikings decide to possibly carry 4 tight ends and maybe 0 fullbacks this year. Who knows? Okay,
well, and it's possible, too, because I know they were teaching Zach Line the same thing, learning how to block after he'd been kind of a tailback in a one-back system in college. But, if you look back at the first round, an awful lot of fans were screaming for the Vikings to take Teddy Bridgewater's former receiving target from Louisville, Devontae Parker, in the first round. But they passed on him, and they finally took a wide receiver in this speedy guy from Maryland, wideout Stephon Diggs. And I hear he's lightning fast, and he can do some pretty good things after the catch. Talk to us about
Stephon Diggs is an interesting player. He was very highly regarded coming out of high school. He was one of the top recruits in the nation, and he decided to stay at home and play at Maryland. In 1 year at college, he kind of had some injury concerns, which are not a concern now, I should reiterate, but kind of slowed him down a little bit. But he's kind of a do-it-all player. I think he's that prototypical slot receiver that we kind of lacked on our roster. And I figured we would pick up a slot receiver somewhere in the draft. Mm-hmm. Just because I think we had the 2 outside receivers covered to be a competition on the outside, but we didn't have that prototypical slot receiver that kind of has the speed to turn, a 3rd and 8 play that's underneath into a first down. Diggs really, though, he's a physical talent, but he is good. He has a decent set of hands, and every time he touches the ball, he can kind of take it to the house, if you really just want to put it bluntly. There's multiple times on tape when he was at Maryland, and they run him underneath on 3rd and 5, and kind of just does that check down. Mm-hmm. He'll turn 3rd and 5, break 2 tackles, and you get a first down. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of player you're getting here. There's also multiple times where they lined him up in the backfield and kind of handed him the ball, and he was able to pick up good yardage that way as well. So he kind of can do anything that you really need him to do. He's also an electric kick returner and can also be a punt returner as well. So even if the Vikings don't expect him to step in from day one at the wide receiver spot, he can also add some great value on special teams, whether that be as a returner or even on the defensive side of special teams as a gunner. Since he has that kind of speed, he can really get down the field fast. When you look at it in the 5th round, I think some media analysts had him later in the round, but when you look at what he can do and the value he adds to a football team, I think it was a very easy pick in the 5th round. I don't know exactly how many receivers went ahead of him. I think it was 18 or 19 receivers went ahead of him, but there's no way in anyone's right mind that there are that many receivers better than him in this draft, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one guy I wouldn't be right now is back to Marcus Sherrill. So he sees a cornerback taken in the 1st round, and then he sees a guy who's potentially a punt returner before. The guy can't catch a break, can he?
No, not really. It's one of the first things I said when they made this pick. Not that Sherrill is off the roster by any means, but I said he's going to have a little more competition on his special team spots than he did in previous years.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, it's funny because as fans, we've all talked about that left guard position. We haven't had anybody there. And, we got down to the 6th and 7th round. We picked a couple of college offensive tackles in Oklahoma's Tyrus Thompson in the 6th, and then Alabama's Austin Shepard in the 7th. Do you see these guys as tackles or guards in the NFL?
I think Shepard's definitely be someone who they're going to bump inside and try out at guards. I don't see him holding up as an offensive tackle in the NFL. He was fine at Alabama and he did well, but I think the upside, he just doesn't have like the special traits you really look for in NFL offensive tackles. Do I think he can be a solid guard? Absolutely. I think he's someone who can kind of be in that Joe Berger role. In the future, he's never going to be, in my mind, just that stud starter. But at the same time, he's going to be more of an above-average backup if he's able to hold on to the roster spot this year as well. When you look at players who possibly can make the practice squad, not that I want to discount his opportunity to make the roster now, but he's the exact type of players you want to hold on your practice squad. He's someone you can call up and plug in as a depth player immediately. And he's that great kind of talent that actually gives you some competition to go up against in practice as well. It's not like you're just going against some pushover. So he brings a lot of experience to the table as well. He played against good competition, so I think that he'll put up quite a fight in training camp to make the roster. Tyrus Thompson, on the other hand, is a bit frustrating to watch on tape. He has all the physical skills and the size you want in a prototypical left tackle in the NFL, not even a right tackle. But he doesn't always show the effort. He finishes on blocks, but he doesn't finish all the way through. He's kind of one of those players that kind of gets halfway there and then kind of gives up. Not that he completely gives up, but he just doesn't finish things the way you'd totally like to see a player just throw someone on the ground. Legally, of course. But I think that they might try to bump him inside a guard. I think that he's the type of player that can play both offensive tackle and offensive guard. And if you think about what we did in the 4th round to pick up TJ Clemmings, I think they're going to try to keep Clemmings as an offensive tackle, which would kind of by default put Thompson more as a guard, just for the purposes of trying to build some depth on the roster.
Right.
But I think a lot of fans are very concerned about that left guard spot, but I really don't understand what's wrong with Joe Berger. I really don't understand what's wrong with plugging him into that left guard spot. He showed that he was very capable of playing right guard last year when Brandon Fusco was out. He's been a depth player on the line and has held on to his spot on the roster for multiple years, and the guy is very deserving of a chance. Every time he's been put into action, he's never been the weakest link on the line by any means.
And I'll tell you what, Geoff, I mean, that's important that you talk about because you said it several times to me before and tonight as well, it's one of the positions that takes a while to get a hang of in the NFL. You very rarely see rookies come in and have a lot of success. So it's nice to know that we're getting some people in here, give them some experience and get ready because, Phil Odho can't play forever. There's still question marks about Matt Khalil, and there may be issues with the guard position. So if you bring in this trio here, you've got something to work with and think about over the next year.
Definitely. No, I'm very excited about what we did near the end of the draft. And it was a prototypical Rick Spielman draft where he takes skill positions early and he fills needs based on value on the board. But then at the end of the draft, he fills up on offensive and defensive linemen because you know what? You're always going to need depth at those positions.
Yeah.
No matter which team you are, no matter what position you play on, those are the oft-injured players, the players that take the longest to develop. And when you look at late-round draft picks that turn out, it's most likely the offensive tackles and the defensive end of the world, more than anyone else, if you just want to look at it from a pure stats.
Well, no doubt. Well, when you talk about somebody making it the version of the Vikings Loman's Trophy, it goes down to the 7th round choice. And it's intriguing to me just because I know very little about the guy. He's Edmund Robinson. He's kind of this freakishly long-frame linebacker from little-known Newberry College. And what are we thinking for him? I mean, he selected jersey number 40. Could he be some kind of hybrid safety linebacker in a nickel package?
Interesting question. I think really what the Vikings have shown in the past few years is Rick Spielman loves the 7th round picks. I know it's basically a GM philosophy. Some love them, some hate them. But really it's your first dibs at those unrestricted or non-drafted free agents. And I know a lot of people had Edmund Robinson as someone who was not going to be drafted. But he has intriguing size and speed combination, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
He has a very long ways to go, absolutely. I don't even want anyone to start thinking that he can possibly be an outside linebacker from day one. But he's someone that you can bring in, try out. Maybe he sticks at special teams, but he's someone that's worth developing if you can stick him and stash him on your practice squad for a few years. I think he's a prototypical outside linebacker.
Okay.
That's how I view him as, I guess. But he has a ways to go in development. With the size and speed combination, I said there's definitely upside. I think it's almost a carbon copy of the Brandon Watt pick last year.
Okay.
Where they're picking up a player who can possibly stick as a special teamer because he has the speed you want to get on the field and he has the size to make tackles. That's important. To be able to have that combination on special teams. But he also has that potential to, be a better player than you'd think in the NFL, just by the fact that he was able to produce pretty nicely at Newberry, which is a D2 college. And I believe he was the first D2 player off the board. Of course, Ali Marpet, the offensive lineman from Hobart, was the first non-D1 prospect off the board. But, I like it. I think it's a decent pick, especially considering what was left on the board. Given the Vikings' needs, I think they picked up a player that can, at least compete in camp, and that's all you can really ask for.
No doubt. And, as we close out the conversation tonight, Geoff, I want you to consider all 10 draft picks the Vikings selected and tell me which one you expect to make the biggest impact in his rookie season and which one you think might be the likely disappointment.
Biggest impact in year one, I think, is Eric Kendricks. Not that anything is against Trey Waynes. I like that pick a lot. But when you look at what our defense has lacked, is we've lacked the option of having a coverage linebacker in the middle in our base package. With Jasper Brinkley, you saw a player you can come downhill and you can tackle the ball carrier very nicely, and that's great. But being able to have that opportunity to sit in your base coverage, maybe an extra down, it just adds more intrigue to what we can do on defense. And we all know Mike Zimmer, he's a very good defensive coordinator in the sense that he doesn't try to get too complicated, but at the same time, some of the most basic schemes he throws on the field can be very complicated in the offense since he puts players in positions that they're very successful in. So I think from a coverage standpoint, our linebacker groups increased tremendously. As for a player who maybe won't make an impact in year one, I don't know if you would call it a disappointment per se, but I think Donnell Hunter is going to be someone that's going to take a little bit of time to come around. I know a lot of people probably think in your third-round pick you're going to get a player who's going to step in from day one and provide some sort of impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pick was based more on upside than anything, seeing what he can become. I think he definitely can be in a rotation from year one. He may have an impact or a splash play or kind of show a flash of what he's capable here or there, kind of like Everson Griffin did when he was a younger player in the league. But I really wouldn't expect him to go from raw prospect to a polished defensive end in year one, I guess, which is some people may believe will happen.
Got it. So our key is we're looking at a linebacker to make a big splash play, maybe a little bit of our first-round pick, and then count on these guys who are a little bit more raw, and they can kind of have to develop kind of your tight end with Michael Pruitt, and also, here in the defensive end with Hunter. So no doubt about it. And Geoff, I want to thank you for helping us summarize the Minnesota Vikings 2015 draft. I know you can do it a lot better than me, and we continue to look forward to your editorial contributions and insights on VikeFans.com.
Absolutely. No, thanks as always, Tom, for having me. I appreciate sharing my insights and hope that the members enjoy it. I know they always say they do, but I always like to share it. It does not work for me when I'm having fun.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again for joining tonight.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
All right.
Good night.
You too.